Have you ever watched a cat trying to catch its own tail? Round and round it goes, spinning faster and faster, convinced that if it just tries a little harder, moves a little quicker, it will finally grasp what it's chasing. But the harder it tries, the more elusive the tail becomes. And then quite suddenly, the cat stops. It sits down, yawns, and begins to clean its paw. And there, curled peacefully beside it, is the tail it was chasing all along. This, my friends, is a perfect picture of the human condition. We spend our lives chasing happiness, success, peace, love, spinning ourselves dizzy in the effort. We force, we push, we strain against the natural flow of things, convinced that life is a problem to be solved, rather than a reality to be lived. What if I told you that the very act of forcing is what keeps you from what you seek? What if the secret to having everything is wanting nothing? You see, we've been taught from childhood that life is a battle to be won. We must fight for our place in the world, struggle against circumstances, overcome obstacles through sheer force of will. This is the great illusion of our time. We believe that if we just try hard enough, plan carefully enough, control tightly enough, we can bend reality to our wishes. But life, real life, doesn't work this way. Life is more like water than stone, more like music than machinery. Think about breathing for a moment. Right now, as you sit there, your lungs are filling and emptying without any effort on your part. You don't have to think about it, plan it, or force it to happen. It simply flows naturally, effortlessly. But what would happen if you suddenly decided you must control your breathing completely? If you tried to force each breath, time each inhale perfectly, manage every exhale with precision, very quickly you would become anxious, tight, out of rhythm with yourself. The very act of forcing would disturb the natural grace that was already there. This is exactly what we do with life. We take what should be as natural as breathing and turn it into a struggle. We force our relationships, demanding they be exactly as we envision. We force our careers, pushing and striving until we forget why we wanted success in the first place. We force our happiness, chasing pleasures and avoiding pains until we exhaust ourselves in the effort. But there's another way. There's an ancient wisdom that speaks of wu-wei, which means acting without forcing. It's the way of water, which always finds its path not by fighting the rocks, but by flowing around them. Water doesn't struggle against the landscape. It accepts what is there and finds the most natural way through. And in time, gently, persistently, it carves out canyons and shapes mountains. I once knew a man who spent years trying to force his way to happiness. He worked 16-hour days, convinced that if he just earned enough money, bought the right house, found the perfect woman, he would finally be content. He planned every detail of his life, scheduled every moment, controlled every variable he could think of. And yet the harder he chased his vision of the good life, the more miserable he became. One day, exhausted and defeated, he found himself sitting by a river. He had no energy left to plan or force or strive. He simply sat there, watching the water flow past. And in that moment of complete surrender, something extraordinary happened. He felt a peace he had never known, a contentment that had nothing yet. How now? Now that card really fits. He felt a peace he had never known, a contentment that had nothing to do with his circumstances. The happiness he had been chasing for years was there, had always been there, waiting quietly beneath all his frantic activity. This is the great paradox. When you stop forcing life, when you relax your grip and allow things to be as they are, you discover that what you were seeking was never absent. It was only hidden beneath your effort to find it. Now, I want to be clear about something. When I speak of not forcing, I'm not talking about becoming passive or lazy. I'm not suggesting you should never take action, or that you should just float through life without any direction. The art of not forcing is actually much more subtle than that. It's about finding the difference between action that flows from natural response and action that comes from desperate grasping. Think of a skilled archer. When the master archer draws the bow, there is great strength and precision in the action. But there is no forcing, no straining, no desperate attachment to the result. The archer becomes one with the bow, the arrow, the target. The release happens naturally at exactly the right moment, like a ripe fruit falling from a tree. This is what it means to act without forcing. You can still work, still create, still pursue your goals, but you do it with a light touch. You plant seeds and water them, but you don't pull on the shoots to make them grow faster. You do what you can do, and then you step back, allowing life to do what life does. But here's where it gets interesting. Most of us have been so conditioned to force that we don't even know what natural action feels like. We've forgotten how to tell the difference between flowing with life and swimming against the current. So, how do you begin to recognize the difference? Pay attention to how you feel when you're taking action. When you're forcing, there's a quality of strain, of tension, of desperately needing things to turn out a certain way. There's often a voice in your head saying, "This must work. This has to happen. I need this to succeed or else." When you're flowing, there's still energy and intention, but it feels more like play than work. There's a naturalness to it, like a bird singing or a flower blooming. Forcing feels like pushing a heavy rock uphill. Flowing feels like sailing with a favorable wind. Both require skill and attention, but one is a struggle against nature, while the other is a dance with it. Let me tell you about Sierra, a woman I once knew who discovered this difference in the most unexpected way. She was a painter who had spent years trying to force herself to create masterpieces. She would sit at her easel for hours wrestling with the canvas, desperate to produce something significant, something that would prove her worth as an artist. Her paintings during this time were tight, controlled, lifeless. Then one afternoon, frustrated beyond measure, she threw down her brushes and walked away. She didn't paint for weeks, but slowly, gradually, she found herself picking up a pencil here and there, sketching little things that caught her eye. A cat sleeping in a window, shadows on a wall, her own hand holding a cup of tea. There was no pressure, no goal, no forcing. She was just playing the way a child plays, and something magical began to happen. These simple sketches had a life, a spontaneity, a beauty that all her forced masterpieces had lacked. When she finally returned to painting, she brought this same spirit with her.